middle school. Though.
Okay.
Those kids, they can come up. No, you don't.
No. I'll take high school.
I mean,
or
they come up with things like high school, they're a
I'll
little
take
quieter,
nursery and preschoolers.
and, you know, I just remember some of the things, you know, they asked me if I only paddled one student in my entire career.
That's impressive.
You know who that was? Josh Black.
Oh, my goodness, I know him.
Yep. Yeah.
And he said she busted my ass and I love her for it.
See, that's the problem, is they got rid of swans and paddling,
Yes,
because it was
There's no
Sister
discipline.
Caroline
yeah,
in junior high, St. Thomas More, Ohio Pike.
But,
She had
you
a
know-
huge paddle. She was 6'5".
Yes,
Really?
on his
Oh,
stepfather,
yeah.
but-
She was tall. Well, and it was funny because years later, when my dad had passed away and I'm standing in line, you know, the receiving line, and there was Sister Caroline. I'm like, oh my God, you're alive. You know,
I'm gonna tell you this, it stuck with me, because my birthday, I'll be 85, so you can imagine how long I've known this. There was a little boy that lived there down the street, there on the main drag in Mount Orem. And he had a little bit of learning difficulties, but we would go every year to Moorhead to science fair. And we'd take a bunch of students, they loved that. And he rode with me and Betty Lywick, a teacher. And he said, this has been the best day of my life. I've never been out of Mount Orem. There was a Frisch's in Ripley back then. We stopped, we bought him lunch.
wow.
And he said, I'm so excited. I think I'm gonna have hair on my chest next year.
oh my gosh.
And Betty said, well, what makes you think that? He said, well, it's already up to my waist.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Wow.
All right, well, let's get this party started.
Okay, I was gonna say, so, we are going to be live streaming YouTube, so we may have public,
Yeah, no dirty
participation.
jokes.
We'll try to behave.
So just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, go right ahead.
There's a nap. Okay,
Ready?
yep, you're ready.
Mark,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Here.
Tina, here, Tabitha. Okay.
All right, any public participation?
Heather is not really public, but she's joined us by Zoom, and Tracy said if she is able to, she will connect by Zoom. They have her in Hamilton today, starting school things, and she couldn't get back this.
Hamilton, Ohio?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. All right, then we need approval of the minutes for the July 2023 special and regular board meetings.
I moved.
Second.
Mark,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina. Yes. Tabitha.
Yes.
Okay, Lynn, on the correspondence.
Yes, so, Public Library Fund came into, our portion of it was just under $72,000. In the big scheme of things, when looking at that amount that's credited for this month, we need to average just under $59,000 a month from the PLF to meet what we said we were going to get in our budget, what our budget's based on. And considering that we have exceeded $59,000, I think in every month of the year so far, I don't see that that's going to be a problem. So that's a big thumbs up. The Department of Taxation did release calendar year 2024's first projections. And so I listed those on the correspondence. It looks like based upon what should come to the county or what they think will come to the county, that our portion by the end of next year should be just over $968,000. We budgeted for $900,000 this year. So I anticipate we will probably look at budgeting for $900,000 again next year, so that we have a little room for wobbles in the economy and whatever. Then as far as Ohio Library Council, one of the things that just came on their radar is that some libraries have been contacted about a public records request. And I listed it on the correspondence sheet that I sent yesterday, but it's an FOIA, which is Freedom of Information Act request regarding your library's blacklist. Now, I have never, in my experience, heard anybody asking for a blacklist, making the assumption that we keep a blacklist. And this is things that we have, if we've kept records about complaints about materials we purchased or challenges, or we have a reconsideration request, if somebody really doesn't like what they see on our shelves, they can go through a process where we will review that request. So they're looking for this, but it came in a very general way and it wanted responses in 3 days. Now, by law, that you can't request, it has to be provided within a reasonable amount of time. And so there's some, it just makes you kind of wary of this kind of request. Now, we have not received anything like that. Doesn't mean we won't, but just thought you ought to know that that's something that some Ohio public libraries are now experiencing.
So do we know who that came from?
We do not.
I have a suggestion. Also, if I step out here, let's say you walk into a library and you're looking to take out a book, and as you're going down one of the aisles, you see a book and you're like, I don't know if I like that book, and I don't know if I like it, then don't check it out.
Walk right on it.
I mean, and then the next person that comes in, they don't have to check it out.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean,
Yeah.
so that's
It's like
all we
going to a
know.
restaurant, you don't call a restaurant and say, I don't want you to serve onions because I don't like onions.
Ooh, that's, I like that.
That is,
You just don't eat that.
that is perfect, absolutely perfect, but that's the part I struggle with.
Yeah.
Just let others,
They don't have to read it.
right,
And,
they don't
and
have to.
if somebody else wants to read it, then that's their right.
Heather says she loves it. I'm assuming she loves your analogy is what she's saying. Yeah. Don't eat the onions. Yep, that's what she loves. Don't eat the onions. Great analogy. And then there's also a new coming on the horizon. The governor announced a Read Ohio initiative, which includes implementing a science of reading curriculum. I don't know if this is something you're already aware of. So it really is to look at things like what is the scientific basis? How do people really learn literacy? And so it's going to have curriculum implications in the schools, and we will be looking at it. I know OLC will probably work with the state library to come up with some training for youth staff in libraries so that they can also do that in our story time and other kinds of literacy activities. And then last but not least is the Ohio Library Council. I think I've mentioned before that it's the tail end of Fair Week. So other than myself, I'm not sure who else will be able to manage to go to it, but it's focusing on teamwork, and it's been a while since I've been to that kind of a training. So I'm going to go and make sure that we're on the right track and are noticing things we need to notice. I'm just checking my list here to make sure. One of the other things I'm just going to point out is there's also, as far as training goes, there's a Fiscal Officer 102 workshop that is really geared toward broader fiscal officer duties, and ones that are very much library specific. So it's not so much the workings of UAN and that kind of thing, but things like the history of the Public Library Fund. And
I sat there my third day at the library.
did you?
3 days in, like deer in headlights.
Well, and that's one of those things. It's also, there's an introduction to Oakland, which is our Ohio Public Library Information Network, and E-rate and workers' comp. And so Heather is actually going to be doing this virtually, because you can do it virtually as well as in person, because it will be good background training for her because a library director needs to know about these things, so. So that's about it. And I had kicked on the air because I thought it was stuffy, but I'm feeling it blowing really cold on me. How are you all doing? Is it cold?
Oh, you know, I'm happy.
Glad I
with
got a
cooler.
job.
All right, well, you need to tell me when I need to go and press the button and turn off the blower, okay? So don't hesitate. And that's. all
Thank
I
you,
got.
Lynn. Okay, on to financial reports, Sarah.
Kathleen, I wanted to let you know that I'm now having trouble with my Fayetteville utility bill.
Just like you said.
You jinxed me last month.
Well, I went ahead and paid the extra 100 because I thought $100 is not worth this.
So last month, the little, cardboard, it said we owed nothing.
Yeah,
And I was like, we owe something. So we paid what we normally would pay, 62 something.
yeah.
And so we got another bill this week and it says, oh, nothing, credit of $62. And then I think their name's
You're
Maybe they
getting
charged
credit
it
for
to
mine.
us because ours was like almost $150 higher than it was the month before.
Maybe that's it. So I've called Susan. I've left her messages. She hasn't returned my call.
Called who?
Susan is the lady on when I press 3 for the utilities.
Andy Huber.
Okay. Okay.
They're probably overwhelmed with phone calls, I would
Yes.
I
imagine.
don't want to keep sending money. I know we owe money.
Mary Thaxton is gonna be taking it over, but Andy's having a hard time letting it go.
Okay.
Put it in the escrow. No, it's due, just.
I always worry towards the end of the year because you never know. I don't want to mess anything up.
What started mine was last December. My sister-in-law did it, never had a problem. But I got everything put together for December mail. My property taxes, like up there, we've got all these people. I'm about to use a bad word, and my grandson Jesse say, "Watch your mouth." But they gripe about the income tax. We were the only village in Brown County that didn't have that. And I said, if you make $60,000, you'll pay $600 a year. I pay that much in property taxes. Because I own 3 houses and a barn and 5 lots. My husband was a nut. He always wanted to be a farmer in a village. I should write a book, which I am. But anyway, what I did was I made out my property tax bill, my Fayetteville Perry sewage, that one, and other bills. And then I made the utilities, which I just take that down and drop it in the little drop box there.
Right.
But I accidentally dropped it in with the rest of the mail at the post office. So as soon as I did it, I realized, and next day I went, they said, oh no, it's been fucked up, it'll go to Cincinnati. I thought, oh brother. So I
There
wrote
you go.
another check and put it in the drop box. Well, my sister-in-law got it, she deposited both of them. So
You have a big
that's,
credit.
so that's why in January, I thought, I'm not paying the bill, but they still charge me.
So,
And I've tried to explain that, and it just like goes in one ear and out the other, and I thought, $100 is not worth
Yeah.
worrying about.
so Sue's getting double billed and
Well,
I'm getting no bill.
Yeah, but I'm not in the village.
Oh, okay.
But it did, electric went up.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Well, Duke's a whole other issue that I'm having too, so. All right, on to financials. Sorry. Appropriation summary, month to date, I'm comparing June versus July. Salary $62,861.67, that's down about $4,710. And Lynn actually questioned this. The June 15th check was for almost like 14 days and it was almost $40,000. So it was significantly more than we usually have. So that's the difference right there. Employee fringe benefits, $17,461. That's up around $1,600. Purchase and contracted services, $36,279. That is up $27,810. So just like everything, there's peaks and valleys. So May was really high and then June and now July was we paid a lot more.
Well, because we have some quarterly
Right,
payments, so
right.
that's one of the reasons for the
Right.
huge jump, yeah.
Library materials, information and supplies, 33,253. Let's see, we are up 11,814 for library materials and supplies. So month to date general, up 32,834.85 compared to June. Total month to date expenditures, all funds, 163,528.30. That's up 31,577 compared to June. The bank reconciliation report, receipts for the month of July, 365,670. Payments, $166,155. Adjustments, $997.08. Those were friends payments and for a lot of the SRP stuff, as well as donation adjustments. We brought in a lot of money for receipts. 93,981 was PLF. We received a nice chunk of money for income tax, $259,108. And then our normal quarter invoices for $5,538. Outstanding payments for the month of July. I'll be happy to report that Bigfoot finally cashed her March payments. I literally, everybody in the library probably heard me with scream in excitement when I saw it post to our bank account. So it's just the little things in life. I do have an outstanding Duke check for $2,100. That was mailed out on July 11th. So I said Duke has been a thorn in my side. So don't know why they're holding on to that. It does need to clear because I don't want the electricity to go out in Fayetteville's building. General cash fund, cash flow summary reports under the actual July. I mentioned the PLF was 93,981. I mentioned the general property tax, the real estate was 259,108. Services provided from other entities, 7,451. Other receipts, 2,494, bringing our total general fund revenue for the month of July, $363,036.29. General fund expenditures, I kind of already mentioned all of those numbers. That equals $147,984. Bringing our general fund bank balance over $1 million, slightly over $1 million. So it was a good month in the revenue department. So I would, Tina, I know you always want to talk about Star Ohio. So I would suggest that we just kind of see how we end third quarter and then, yeah. I knew you were thinking it.
I was thinking it, I wasn't gonna say anything.
Yeah,
I agree with you, like, let's just see how it is.
Yeah.
If we see a trend.
exactly. Then we move maybe 200,000 more out of.
Yep.
Expenditure or cash summary by fund. I mentioned expenditures for the month of July, $163,528. July, the reconciliation report just gives you a breakdown of everything. Payment, 76,762. July 14th and July 28th payroll were very similar, 36,120 for the 14th and 36,268 for the 28th. The board share retirement, 10,134. Board share Medicare, $1,014. Board share health insurance, $5,385. And then you'll see the local taxes. Out of pocket for health insurance for the employees was $1,340, bringing the total expenditures $163,520.30. Payment listing, you'll notice at the top, I did a lot of adjustments. Like I mentioned before, those were either friends checks that they gave me towards their what they said they would pay for, or donations that I had to adjust that we received earlier in the year. Questions about any of the checks that I wrote? You'll notice a big one we wrote to Highland for $9,742.
Insurance payment.
Yeah, insurance, Ingram, one of our book companies, $9,213. So those are the numbers that made the appropriation summary report higher.
What is this, the Treasury State of Ohio for 6,900? Is that like a regular payment?
That's probably the quarterly SEO.
SEO,
okay.
yeah.
So, this, through the state library, of course, you pay the treasurer of the state of Ohio when you do something through the state, but our consortium, our library consortium bills us quarterly
Quarterly, yeah.
for cataloging and all the app, if you have a library app, those kinds of things, yeah.
That's another book, another company we're getting books from.
And we actually bought, those were the backpack kits,
Oh, okay.
right? Those things that, Don Cheryl, well, my fingers not closing out the chat there.
I have a quick question on the front page just for my education. I see here that there were the credits of $1,871 for supplies.
Sometimes that shows up as a negative number and
I was just curious how that.
I think it's from the adjustments that maybe I'm adjusting stuff where it's not, I haven't used it enough.
Okay, but it
So,
wasn't like a.
everyone's-
Credit.
Every once in a while, this time of year when I'm doing all the adjustments, I've noticed that shows up.
Yeah.
Fund summary report, open POs, currently $126,083.41. Mostly in the general fund. Capital projects is where most of that is sitting. Any questions?
And we will need a motion, please.
Okay, I'll move.
1 second.
You know, the Star Ohio, wasn't Mike Boyd the treasurer of Mount Orem for years?
I believe so, yes. Thank you, Heather. STEM to go kits, that's what's Penworthy.
Well, the Star Ohio, he was also the treasurer at the vocational school for years. And he always really believed in Star Ohio because they do have an excellent background. I don't know how else to put that.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever worried about it.
Yeah, they're the only really vetted place that a public institution
Yeah.
can safely invest, yes.
Need a second?
Yeah, we had
Yes,
Tina,
second.
right?
Tina, I'm sorry.
Mark,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Tabitha.
Yes.
All right, next we have an update on the general audit.
So basically, as of last week, we were kind of at a standstill when I talked about it last month at Fayetteville. So I thought I'd reach out to Bobby, our auditor, and see where we stand. And then guess what? 6 hours later, she had a whole laundry list of stuff that she needed from me.
As you shall. Yeah.
So she kind of mentioned she just had a very small portion left. She was hoping to have it finished today, or not today, but this week, but as of Monday, I didn't hear anything else from her. Most of the questions were on Friday, so hopefully she has what she needed and.
So
it's
you were
wrapped
able to
up.
get everything back to her pretty quickly?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
the lucky part is she has access to UAN, so she can pull a lot of the reports. She asks for things that she can't really find because she made it very clear early on that she had never audited a UAN client before. So sometimes it's just pulling reports or showing her how to pull reports, and then it's a lot of policy stuff too.
Yeah.
So then I have to beg Lynn to give her some policy stuff. I don't have to beg, but
So it's just another step in the
Right.
process of making sure she has everything that she needs.
so hopefully, she said, she was hoping to be done this week, and then her supervisor Renee, who we've all been in contact with, will have to do some checks and balances.
Is there a timeline that it has to be?
But there can't possibly be because it's been going on.
What, since January?
At least March.
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
March,
Yeah.
okay, thereabouts, yeah. It feels like it's been a long time, and they're actually, I mean, they have all of our 2021, 2022 records, and
financial
we've
stuff.
needed some of those things to look at detail that we can't just get from a report.
Right, so they have the physical.
So they have the
paper.
physical.
They have probably a dozen boxes
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
or more, 15, so.
So it's, So there are moments like, I need to submit this other thing
Yeah.
to somebody else for something, but I can't get my hands on the details.
She would scan stuff for us, but it would, like a needle in a haystack almost for her to find exactly what we need, but.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're like everybody. I'm sure they're short staffed. She's made it clear she's doing several audits at one time.
Yes.
Done talking.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, then on to the executive director's report, which is going to be building report and statistic.
Mhm. So the one thing that I'd like to point out from the building report is that if you add up the numbers, although Georgetown didn't specifically state, so I'm just kind of making a guesstimate on the number of summer reading program registrants that they had. We had over 500 people registered for summer reading programs here, and that is larger than and without going back and looking at every year's statistical report, I don't recall a single year in my history here that we've had as many people registered.
How many people use the app? They're
The Beanstack app, that Heather might be able to off the.
I was just curious, like, if that generated an increase because it was more accessible.
There were some
Okay.
that only did the program through the app, some unique users, but it was just a handful that I
Okay.
recall that Heather mentioned. Go ahead, Heather.
I think we had 218 or something like that registered and participated on the Beanstack app. And then I think when we were checking them against people that actually had registered in-house and had been turning in tickets in-house, like Mount Orb had 6, I think, that were just doing Beanstack that had not been into the library. I'm not sure about the other branches because I didn't see their lists of names. But I did tell them to check them pretty carefully. But I think Mount Orb had the majority of the registrants was from Mount Orb. So I think if we had 6, if the other branches had a couple, that's usually how it works out.
Yeah, it is. And it's the first year, and the timing of it was that our own staff didn't have a lot of time to get educated about it before it rolled out. So, another year's worth where more people use it, and it will be, but I do know that several staff members made a real point of actually showing it to people when they register, that there was opportunity to do
I
that.
loved it.
So
Yeah, it was, to me, it's easier
to do.
because it's like done.
Done,
You don't
yeah.
have to worry about.
Yeah. Any questions or thoughts or comments about anything that appeared on that building report? Busy, busy, busy. And, at the end of July, everybody breathes a huge sigh of relief because they're exhausted. If we want to move on to statistics, a couple of things that I want to point out to you. So in the interlibrary loan category, which is that second block down on the page, on your pink page. So if you recall or looked closely at those interlibrary loan numbers, the number for last month was much, much higher. It was about double that. And I had already kind of thought that just looks odd to me. And so between last meeting and this meeting, we went back. Apparently in February, our circulation system, that the software that runs the catalog checking out and all of that, they changed their reporting mechanism. And so it started pulling different numbers for that particular report. And so we went, we haven't gone back and changed every month before this, but I said, Megan, please, let's make sure that at least the year to date in this month is correct. So what you see now is correct. Our total year to date interlibrary loans are just over 65,000. Now, if you're looking at that and comparing it to last year, that's still we're about the 60% mark of the year. So we're still on, the path to have more interlibrary loans than we did last year. It's just not an overwhelming amount, like I was looking at and going, how could we possibly have already exceeded, what we did
Mhm.
last year? For the whole thing you'd looked at, yes, we corrected it. This is correct. We will go back and revise prior months so we actually have accurate records. Looking at the programs, of course, we've just finished, our biggest program season. And one of the things I'd like to point out is that with programming, a focus of ours is having quality programs and not necessarily quantity programs, so it's not like, how many programs can we do? Because we don't have the staff to just roll program after program. And if all we're doing is sitting down every day of the week and reading a story to whatever kids show up, that's not a quality program.
No.
So I just point out that while we still look to draw in more people, and it's really more about the content of what we provide and whether people are interested in it. And sometimes we choose well, and sometimes we choose and we've chosen not so well. And, and sometimes it's because, well, we picked a day when there are 17,000 other things going on in the county and, you just don't draw people. So I try to make sure that our staff don't feel too locked into numbers when it comes to programming, and it's more about the quality of what we're providing. And then just a kind of a forewarning towards the bottom, the patron accounts. Once a year, our consortium goes through and cleans up its patron account database. And they're in the process of doing this right now. So I think in next month's statistics, you will see a large number of accounts deleted because they'll have gone through with their annual purge. And I think I listed this on the announcements where we actually have some parameters, the accounts have to be inactive for 3 years. They can't have any lost items still attached to those accounts, and they have to have less than $25 in actual. I'm not gonna say fines because we don't charge fines, but sometimes there are fees for whatever reason. So if it's under $25, we just say, clean up the database. We're never gonna get them anyway, so.
Is that why that number for 22 is so high?
Yes,
Part of that annual
because it's usually 1,000 plus. If people move,
Yeah.
there's transients there, so. The only other thing in statistics I want to point out, unless anybody has any questions about the pink sheet, I just want to point out something about the chat statistics that the goldenrod, and it's not even the statistical part, it's the narrative part of it. I have this done every month, it's both so you can see some representative transactions that go on and not just have numbers, but actually what are we, answering, but also as a way that I can be reminded, oh, gee, maybe we need to do some training in some places. I will just say that the first dialogue on this list was not what I would say is the best representation of the kind of way a chat should be represented. There are a couple of questions that the patron actually had to keep asking that, we should have been proactive and offered some information. So we'll be discussing that in a manager meeting and doing some training. So I wanted you to know that, this is not part of the reason we do this is just for my own benefit, so we can see this and help deliver the best customer service that we possibly can.
Now, do all employees answer the chats, or is it just selected people on the training?
So the way we do it is we divide up the shifts that were open. And so it really varies, if it happens to be Georgetown shift, it's whoever's scheduled. And I know managers do try to make sure that their most qualified people are actually doing the answering, but we also need to make sure everyone is trained as well. And, sometimes it's what it is, and sometimes there's no time, and sometimes, there are lots of things, and I'm not going to make excuses because I don't know the story behind the one that was, in this month's packet. But, there are lots of things that can impact it. But yeah, it's one of those that we need to consistently, or continually, do training to make sure everybody is ready for
I was
that.
just thinking, if you had champions at each branch that were really good at it, you could almost do like a train the trainer,
Mhm.
and then they could teach.
Well, and actually, I believe, and Heather, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was, Brooke at our last staff development day who actually did that kind of a best practices for chat for everybody.
It was Brooke that did it.
Yeah.
And I will say this in sort of defense, but not, I mean, because I think we've talked and trained and worked with our staff so much on chat. But sometimes we have chat coming through the same time a phone's ringing and there's a patron at the front desk. So they're juggling 3 different things at one time. And I have some staff, one in particular, that freezes up every single time. So her responses, I always know when it's her because she's stiff and the answers are like very just short, and then she'll send like 20 after it, like, okay, this is better response, but she just keeps like, and I'm like, well, oh, it's okay, you did fine, it's okay.
And I too, I know that there are places and I honestly, the older I get, the worse I am at having 7 things come at me once at one time and being able to deal with them well. So I totally get it. And yeah, sometimes it's a matter of that's the only person that's available. And so they're doing the best they can to serve everyone. Yeah. Let's see, other things. Shall I move on to announcements?
Yes, please.
Okay, announcements. So I handed out announcements, the long sheet, and I have a couple of things I feel is important to point out about this. So in facilities, I said that an HVAC quote was in progress. Did get that this morning, I believe it was just this morning. And it's going to, if we repair the unit, it's a bad compressor, I believe, yes, all parts. It's just under $6,500 to repair. Now it's an older unit, it's out of warranty, and it's just under $9,000 to replace it and upgrade it. So I'm going to go with we're just going to replace it. We have the money to do it, and there's no telling whether our $6,500 repair goes, a day after the 1-year warranty that we'll get on the fix.
How old was it?
Exact age. Well, it might be 8 years old. Compressor. Well, see, we also think that there was some electrical surge that helped with the compressor going when it did.
Yeah, that's an easy decision.
Yeah.
And is
Hey,
there
yeah,
a
and 8 years
warranty on the
old.
new one?
What's
Is
that?
there a warranty on the new one?
We'll have a 5-year warranty.
So that's when,
Yeah.
double.
Yeah. So just so you know, and since several months ago or last year, when you allowed us a little more spending authority, you don't have to approve that because it's under the 10,000, but I wanted you to know that was those were the numbers and that's the decision that I made on that one. As far as community engagement, you got that list in your packets, all of the different organizations that we regularly do partnering activities with, participate with. I did make a goof, the Business Advisory Council, if they told me it wasn't going to be the 15th and it was going to be the 22nd of August, I didn't write it in my calendar because I was pleasantly surprised that I had one meeting yesterday that didn't actually happen. So I won't see the Business Advisory Council till next week. Any questions about any of those things? Or Heather, is there anything you want to say about any of the groups you're involved with? Don't see her on mute. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, I just took a drink of root beer. I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay. Let me explain number 3A, the funding opportunities. So E-rate is where we have to apply for reimbursements for internet costs. We'd been approved for the actual internet lines to the branches and to the network maintenance services. Waiting for the hotspots. We did get a denial on the hotspots, and it was only for the units that would have been used by the library to go like to the fair, if we were going to need internet at the fair, or going to the open houses if we couldn't use the school's internet. So it was a small number of hotspots. And I am not going to appeal because the amount of time it would take me to file the forms to appeal, even if we were approved, then I'd have to file forms every quarter to get invoice, to get reimbursement back, and the amount, I've already just wasted more money than we would get back for those few lines. So I'm just not even going to take our time to do that. Let's see, the emergency connectivity fund. This is one of those that I need to submit the reimbursement request for, and the auditor still has some of our records. Thankfully, their deadline, they extended it until the end of October. So I've still got a little while to submit those last couple of reimbursement requests. But that money ended as of service at the end of June. So that was special COVID related money. The library's accelerating learning grant, we finished up the end of the state's fiscal year on June 30th, and everything has been, we finally got this report submitted. They gave us the reimbursement for that last bit of money that was paid out by June 30th. And so now we're fresh for the last year of that grant. So we'll be working on that. And then state budget. Yay, thank your legislators for, having the public library fund at 1.7% of the GRF in permanent law. That's fantastic. We're still a little bit nervous about four numbers letters C, D, and E, because the impact still is kind of unknown. We know that they're condensing income tax brackets and they're reducing income tax rates, which is great for individuals, but it does impact the public library fund.
That's across the whole state.
That's for the whole state. Yeah. The CAT tax, the commercial activity tax, that also, so for businesses, you have to have a certain amount of income, and I'm not sure if it's gross revenue or whatever, before you are subject to these taxes. And they're in the next 2 years, they're raising those thresholds. So more and more businesses will not have to pay that tax. So there's another part of our income that's going away. And property taxes, well, they just formed a committee. So any recommendations about changes to property taxes are going to have to be looked at by this committee before being. So there's a lot of unknowns, and that's why, we still want to be a little bit conservative about how we budget. But the good thing is that the bidding threshold has been raised. So any of the projects that we're doing, we don't have to be so careful about how much money we might spend before we have to actually put out for formal bids. So that's pretty nice. And the only other thing, so number 9, I did a seminar on the legal aspects of employee coaching and documenting, just to make sure nothing had changed, and we're, that's that whole compliance thing. We don't have an HR department, and we rely pretty heavily on a gentleman named Scott Warwick, who is an HR expert and also is an attorney. So we got the legal part, not just the HR part. And there are a couple of things that he said that I just thought was important to speak out loud. Number one is if you were involved in a lawsuit, you've already lost. So if we don't do our training and our documenting well enough when it comes to employee issues, and we get a lawsuit or we're named in a lawsuit, it's too late. One of the reasons is that it's not about the facts of the case, it's about what you can prove, and proof is in the eyes of the jury.
Yep.
And juries, and this is according to a scientific survey that was done recently, juries do not like big organizations or supervisors. Organizations and supervisors are all viewed as liars.
Oh, wow.
So if a jury thinks that the employer and its representatives are liars, then you can't prove anything. So the facts don't matter is basically is what it says. And let me just say, well, I want to read you the two questions that of the survey that bring this conclusion. One of the questions, and these were asked of people actually who had served on juries for HR cases. And one of the questions was, have you ever witnessed sexual harassment or discrimination in the workplace? 3/4 of the jurors said no, they had never witnessed sexual harassment or discrimination in the workplace. The next question or the statement, agree or disagree, sexual harassment is a common occurrence in the workplace. And 3/4 of them agreed. So 3/4 never saw any of these things, but 3/4 agreed that it does
Because
happen.
they assume it.
They
happens,
assume it
and
happens.
Historically,
It's
is
not,
what has happened.
it's not what you see, it's what you believe. It's all about perception.
Mhm.
So there were, yeah, I mean, as well as lots of techniques and compliance things, there were some very interesting philosophical things about how, we run our business as far as dealing with our employees and treating our employees. And a lot of it was about training for empathy, emotional intelligence, so that people, managers, particularly supervisors, can handle the issues and prevent them from ever happening, and that's something you can't prevent, but if you can, that's the whole key.
And diversity and inclusion
Yes,
is
yeah, huge.
right
Yes.
now,
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Very big issue comes in that you won't see it here.
Nearly as much, right?
Right. So thank you, Lynn,
Yeah.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, committee reports.
We haven't had any committee meetings, but we are looking at scheduling a personnel committee meeting in September, and maybe you and Tracy and I will have to email about that, Barb, since Tracy's not here tonight.
Okay,
Who was the other?
It was Karen.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking at this point, I don't know if we just do a 2-person committee for a little while until.
Yeah.
okay, then we've got number 6, the trustee vacancy representing Fayetteville Perry, effective 10/1/23 to June 26, 2027. First item, recruitment process, board composition, and trustee grid, which I have a complaint about.
Go ahead, give it to me.
I don't have an S.
I know, because I didn't know where to put you, I
Oh,
thought.
there's a lot of them.
Well, and that's why I,
Athletic category.
Other second objection.
Other, okay.
Other.
other,
Okay, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
right, so I started, I started with the easy stuff, right? I know your last names, I know when your terms end, I think I know what genders you are, the districts you represent, and then I thought, you know what? This is something that each of you need to self-identify, what you believe your areas of industry or expertise, where those lie, and particularly if I've left anything out. I mean, I used somebody else's grid as a starting point. And so I put in some areas of expertise that I thought could potentially be beneficial to our board, but I am ready to be told, no, well, we don't need this, we should put something else in. This
Do we
is.
turn these in?
I want these because what I want to do is between now and when we actually do trustee interviews, I want to have this grid so we can see where the gaps are. And when we're interviewing, then we can go, oh, we're really looking for people to bring this to the board. So that's, I mean, that's really my point behind it. So I'd love, pass them down if you've got them finished. Thank you very much.
I didn't know doing, like, I didn't know what else, I don't know if that happened.
Anything? Well, and that's.
I mean, I use technology, but what I say, I'm like an
An
expert.
expert?
You know what I mean? I use it every day at school, like all kinds
Right.
of things, but when I'm an expert, then
Well,
I'm not.
That's what the other categories. are
Okay.
for. So you can write in on.
Perfect.
I think
there.
as a I should be.
I'll figure it out. See, and I'll start.
Bossy.
And I,
She brings life to any party.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
vocational.
Oh, at school, I was
The next there.
I don't know.
I think you just put it in.
Yeah.
Oh, should they want us to write it down? Okay.
What if
Yeah,
that
that's a
were
bigger
really
block,
listening
isn't it?
to their side of the story and you're trying.
That's good.
Community connections, how's that?
Oh, that's.
I mean, that's.
that's-
And this is a work in progress, but I figured that at least for some of those big categories, it would really help us to see who are, because I don't know deep down, maybe you've done this for years, something for years and years, and it's something that's never really come up, in discussion. And I think that's important that we know these things and are able to draw upon them. So
Great idea, man. Thank you.
it's just my part of my organizational, okay, this will make it so much easier. Maybe it will.
All right, then, did everybody fill out their little sheets?
I've got a bunch.
I'm
Like I
writing.
said, have it done.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Then the next category is interviews at the September meeting.
Yeah, that's kind of is that what we want to target to do, is to do interviews at the September meeting? I mean, Sue, you said 1st of October was officially kind of.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
out. Yeah, I'll be out of the county
But,
sometime right around the first
Okay.
or second or third or whatever.
so we don't need to do it before then, and honestly, while Sue was very good about giving a name, and I've had a conversation with the person that, she identified. I also, according to our usual practice, I contacted the manager of that branch and
Yes.
said, come up with some names of people you think, might be interested, and then, we'll start that. So my hope would be to have anybody who wants to find out more, have a conversation with me first, so I can give them some more detail. And then, if you want to do it in September, do at the September meeting, maybe even start doing an earlier meeting, do a 6 o'clock. And,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that should work.
So I would ask, how do you want to structure this? I've got questions that I think you've kind of used before to guide conversation, and I've tried to provide you with a summary of what my conversation with the person, each, candidate was, so you had some background, and a resume. Is there anything else that you would want to make sure that you have in front of you before you do interviews?
I think what you've done is perfect,
Okay.
in my opinion. You set us up very nicely.
Okay.
And then,
How about total number of people to interview and amounts of time, so I can kind of figure out, if it's a 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7, 6:20, 6.
I was thinking, did we do 20 minutes? Did we give them 15 minutes each and
15
then 5
minutes.
minutes for us to discuss and then?
Mhm.
Let's see, that, do I remember that, like 20 minutes, 20 minutes?
Okay,
and if we can keep the applicants between 15 and 20.
total
15
applicants.
and 20.
Okay, we gotta start go beating the bushes in Fayetteville, I guess.
I picked the best one that I knew.
Thank you.
Yes, Yes, that's always a good thing to have a.
It's a
Let's start.
highly coveted position.
Oh, yes, because the pay is,
Highly coveted.
I'm sorry, that's, the rewards are
Heather,
even
am I
better than the
supposed to
pay.
read that out loud?
Did Heather say something?
Yes, she did, and I'm afraid to open up the. She said for me to read it, so it says Mark is a brat.
I haven't asked her one question tonight.
Maybe we should rephrase that, Heather, and call him an instigator. How's
Yeah.
that? Oh my, okay, so, so kind of, target 3 people then?
That would be good.
Okay, 3 people, 20 minutes each. We do
Yeah.
a 6 PM.
Yeah.
Okay, and,
Is that going to replace our strategy meeting then, starting at 6?
well, do you want to jump to that on the agenda? That's number 7 on the agenda. Do you want to, or do you want to finish up with the trustee first and
We'll finish
then?
that. I was just
Okay.
wondering if that was gonna replace that time meeting for that.
It would
Yes.
definitely replace
Yes,
that.
that's
So we
fine.
can't do both.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no way we can do both.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so we've got that set for interview September 3. Then the final is vice president election. And that got pretty heated last time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Okay,
there, so I have
who
no idea.
is, okay, we got president, vice president.
So I have I have a list.
Oh,
Yes.
so what?
It was ugly.
Yeah.
It was ugly.
Yeah.
So, so Mark is president and Sue is vice president and Tracy is serving as secretary.
Okay.
And so according to the board bylaws, instead of it being a president appoints to fill an office, it's actually, we have this kind of discussion and then officially at the next meeting, you all have to vote, to approve, because that's
Mhm.
really kind of what you do when do it at the end of the year. So,
Right.
Very, very informal.
Yes.
So wouldn't we, Lynn, promote Tracy?
That's what I was
And
thinking.
then,
That's what I was
and then
thinking too,
fill
yeah.
in the secretary role?
whatever
That's
you
what I was
all
thinking.
want to do.
That would
She's
be
not
my.
here.
Tracy's not here, so.
She's gonna be vice president. She's a big.
You snooze, you lose, right?
Well,
Okay, yeah.
With or without her.
Be absent at your own risk. Okay.
And then if we don't like the votes, then we sue.
Okay. Rebellion,
Okay, I'm sorry.
moving is what you do. Okay, that's it. You can't move.
Oh, my goodness. So I can certainly reach out to Tracy and ask and tell her this is what that everybody would like to do. So who are we recommending then to fill the secretary slot?
Who's been here the longest?
Any
Not me.
I would
volunteers?
say Kathleen's been here the longest, but if you don't care to do it, I'd be willing to.
Oh, thank you.
I'm good with that. Yes, I'm good
Thank
with
you,
that.
Barb.
No, I'm saying, I'd
Unless
offer it to
Kathy
you,
would
even if
feel
you would
like that.
prefer
I
not to.
can't find the right people when you guys.
It's a little more.
Watch me, I mean, thank goodness when Lynn says what color it is, because I read this when it comes, I read through every piece of it, and then we get in here and you guys are like calling things out, and I'm like, I cannot even.
Okay.
I haven't been here long.
She's not ready to be sent.
That's how I felt the first.
It was also the first day of school. Let's get.
Yeah.
I was so fast a minute ago, if I could get up and just walk for a minute,
Yeah,
because I was
do
like,
it,
I
yeah.
felt like I was like.
Still
Do what you need to do.
What is she on?
Usually-
I guess I'll take it. I don't step by step to make sure.
Yes,
I'm
I-
keeping it in
yeah.
order. If I keep it in order, then it's still-
And then getting up early, I'm just, lacking sleep right now, so it's okay, it'll all be good when I. So I have it, and it's the heart rate center, it already races, so. I was trying not to- I do eat chocolate, but it has caffeine, I know, but not like, I wish I could, because I think it would
Really
really
help.
much. Help me.
Yeah. Well, then knowing that particularly, I will try to slow down and make sure I say, and this
No.
color as well. Well,
No, it's okay. You
Yeah.
can eventually find it, but.
Yeah, but it's nice when they let you catch up.
Oh.
On what line where, I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
looking, so
Well,
I'll get it. I'll
if it
figure
helps
out.
any with the financials, she's going reconciliations. Wait a minute, which one is that? Yeah, so you're,
Okay.
we're all together.
And I feel like I've slowed down. Like the Vivian who was before me, she always talked like big time numbers and I've like, I feel like I've brought it down a lot.
No, don't slow
You
down
have.
for me. Like
You
I said, I'll
have.
just
It's easier to-
figure it out. I'm
You're great, you know.
Yeah, no, I just don't know the order, I guess. Yeah, I'm trying to split back and.
I was just sharing with Tina, I'm very careful to keep everything in order as I look at it, because it generally, it's in the
It's
same
in-
It
order.
does flow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It will
Yeah.
flow.
That's what I've been trying to keep it in order, but then the new one, when you set the new.
Oh,
numbers down,
sorry
I'm like,
about
wait a
that.
minute.
I totally missed it.
Where am I? It's okay. I'll figure it out.
I'm laughing with you.
We're all in.
Yes,
We're all
don't
in
give
there.
me any jobs yet, because I'm not ready.
Your job is to learn the ropes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like, I think you do what, a 2 meeting grace period?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
2 minutes in the first
I've been
meeting.
here a couple times, does that pass? But when, like, even the guesses, like, you guys really didn't train me up in that, like, you didn't tell me what I'm supposed to do, I just watched. So, what if I accidentally say no? No, I don't even know what, do people say no?
If they don't agree with
Harold
it.
said
One
no
time, I was like,
once.
Mhm.
Stared at.
This has been predates you, Mark. Kathleen may remember, we were having at a meeting in Georgetown and we had significant discussion to the point where we started voting. And we were going yes, no, and finally I was like, I'm not sure, would you please read what exactly we decided we're actually voting on? Because it had been such an animated discussion. And then they were like, oh, is that how it read? Oh, wait a minute. Yes, everybody, everyone, yeah, it was really interesting. And it was one of those, it was very rare occurrence, yeah.
Yeah, just speaking to that point, it is rare for the group not to come to consensus, but that's because you have good discussion. People put forth whatever they have to say about something and, don't necessarily agree. And I encourage people, if you in your heart can't be at ease with a decision, you need to say no. Or you can abstain, you can do that as well. I've done that in some organizations when I first came on the board and they're going, everybody's going, yes, yes, and I'm like, well, you just handed me this and I said, I abstain, I don't know. And I don't want to sway one way or the other.
Don't ever worry, because as long as I've been on here, I read all my books. I'm belong to book club at Fayetteville. And I read all my books on the Kindle. And I buy them. And I'm thinking, are you stupid? But they haven't been able to download them with Hoopla. So what do I do, Lynn? Cancel my old card and renew my membership?
You can download them on Kindle with Libby, but not with Hoopla.
Yeah.
So, cause I found that.
Yeah.
So when I use the Libby app,
Used to live, yeah.
I can but not all books are in, so you go back and forth between.
Well, I mean,
so-
I just, our book club book.
Yeah.
See, that
Because
one is always
Harold-
Hoopla.
Harold years ago said, I said, well, I kind of like the feel of the book. He said, oh, for crying out loud, get with the program.
I can't believe
You were the
that
first one that had like a BlackBerry.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I did, that
Yeah.
surprises
The
me.
state went with
I
Kindle.
know, same
Yeah.
here.
Because most people from that generation just didn't grasp it
Mhm.
or didn't want to.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, some of the books I'm just not real crazy about, but I still read them because we talk about them when we meet.
Mhm.
So I do want them in my Kindle. I just don't want to buy them.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, number 7, which, Tina alluded to earlier, so, I guess the best way to say this is, Lynn's had a couple of things that have popped up on a personal level.
Okay.
And there's,
There's
too
a
much
lot of
on the
that
plate
lately.
right now. So she had asked and we had discussed, tabling the board retreat and the succession planning until January 2024. Now, the nice thing is the extremely proactive approach on the succession plan. We're way ahead of the curve. And I think everybody realizes that. Thrilled with where we're at, thrilled with the plan. It's August going into September. There's a couple months left this year. You know, I would be okay recommending we table that until January of 2024. And then the same with the board retreat as well, because of everything going on, prioritizing. Table that for the beginning of the year as well and picking it back up. So that's what we had talked about and that's what I'm gonna recommend.
So then we talked about a May date, would that then be pushed back?
Yeah, you can erase that off your
Yeah.
calendars because there's
Okay.
no way that we
Be ready
could
within
be
the-
ready by May.
So basically, we're looking 3 to 4 month push.
Yeah, I would, while fall scares me because fall is really busy. I actually am toying with the idea of if there's some way we can combine the fall, a retreat in the fall with the staff development day training that we always
next
do
year.
for, yes, not for this year, but for
Yeah.
2024, somehow so that the staff actually can, you can see them, they can see you, even if they're there only for a couple of hours or an hour, but that was just one of those light bulb things, like, ooh, maybe we could manage that, but so it will be fall, and after the, first of the year at our January meeting, we'll look at a new date, because everyone should kind of know what's on their plate, for that year, but, honestly, it's in a lot of ways better to do it later because we have not just one new trustee, we'll have a second brand new trustee, and we really need to start fresh to make sure everybody has got the same preparedness for this. So I'm thinking, well, if we have to do this, that, there are some real benefits to this. And of course, we got personnel committee, we've got to deal with wages before the end of the year. We've got to do, this LAL grant is, it's a lot of work. But my goal would be to continue in the background, getting all the information about the consultants we talked about, having, for the retreat, but also as a guide and a coach to the management team. And hopefully actually having them do the presentations in November, at our November meeting. That would be my goal, so that we could then have something ready for the first of the year.
And that almost gives them a 12-month time frame to put them on contract.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the board retreat, combining that, I actually think it might be a good possibility. We don't have to talk about it now, but I would like the opportunity for the board and the staff to maybe meet together to hear from them and to do like a roundtable.
Mhm.
That would help us kind of hear from them one-on-one as
Mhm.
part of that day, maybe like a transition or something, because, going on the floor, that's when you hear the most.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's
Great.
good.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Um,
All right, so are we good with that? Okay, now we're gonna go through a series of motions and resolutions on docket or documents that Lynn has provided for us. The first one, is right on. It's a resolution concerning the proposed redefinition of the tax boundaries of the Highland County District Library.
Right, so why are we voting on Highland County? Is that what's So yes, so what I did was actually I gave you the first 2 pages of our bylaws, and so 1.3 is the definition of our boundaries. So you could see that this is actually something that public libraries have to do through the state library. And we did ours, there was a redefinition, oh, it might even have been almost 10 years ago, when we actually, well, no, it was 2019, apparently was when we revised this. Because the state library was going through some things and they needed every public library to make sure that their boundaries did not overlap with another public library's boundaries. I'm not certain why Highland County is doing theirs now, if they missed it, I'm not sure, but the director of the Highland County reached out to me and to her other adjoining counties to say, will you please pass this resolution, because the state library needs to have something that says we are okay with what they are saying are their boundaries. And if you look at the last orange page, the resolution itself says that their boundaries are Highland County except for East Clinton Local School District. So that says to me, there is nothing that overlaps with any of our boundaries, so we are good with it.
I'm so confused, like, what is East Clinton Local School District, is that part of us?
No.
No,
Why
It's in
doesn't-
Highland County.
Yeah.
So-
So
I
it
don't
may
understand.
well be, see, I believe, somebody help me with geography, the Sabina part of that. There are some municipal libraries that exist independently in some, between us and Clinton County, there's some other, so that would be. Sorry, message just popped up that Heather was doing something on her end. So that may be why they are excluding East Clinton, because there is a township library or a school district
Kinda
library.
like this Ripley, right, like we have, like the Ripley.
Right, so ours are defined, and yeah, and it says we exclude that portion that's in the, you know, their school district of
And why
our.
do we have Highland County on here at all? Like, that's like why is it?
So what I think it is, Tina, is they want us to, in simple terms, they want us to pass this resolution acknowledging that the Highland County District Library, their tax boundary is Highland County,
Yes, and not,
excluding East Clinton. That's all it is. They want us to acknowledge that,
Right,
which I don't get either.
okay.
I don't get that either.
well, and that's why I said
Like, do this
the.
for 87 counties or?
Well, no,
We meet in the northern.
Oh, okay.
Highland and Brown.
Highland and Brown meet.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're, you know, so they're not, if they claim that
Library
part
in
of,
Russellville belongs to Ripley. It's not ours.
No,
right,
no, it's not.
And
So-
there's another one in Aberdeen.
right, so if Highland County claimed that, part of Eastern School District was theirs, you know, maybe it was Franklin Township, because I think that's where Sardinia, right? If they claimed that, then we would be saying,
Okay, okay. So we're
we
not-
do not agree with
Yeah,
you.
we'll just- All right, so how about a resolution?
I will move that we accept this resolution.
I think we have to say, I will.
I resolve
I will
resolve this thing.
Sorry, can I ask one more question? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Maybe. But it talks about Ripley, Union, Lewis, Huntington School District, Pleasant Township, and the school district. It does not mention Russellville.
Russellville's part of.
Russellville's part of Ripley.
Ripley Union. Lewis.
But they're
Well,
not-
but we're not, okay, so
They're not part of that school district, though. They're part of.
No,
Eastern
they're
School
not part
District.
of, they're,
okay, wait a minute, let me say something that may make that a moot.
there was a
point.
lot of people confused when they built that. What they were trying to do at that time was beat us to the buildings.
Okay, so This has nothing to do with
Okay,
this.
sorry.
Did that help?
And maybe offline, you can explain to me why Russellville's not on here? Because
What township is that for? I'm not sure,
It's in part of the Eastern School District.
correct.
but I think if you go by townships. Because Pleasant Township, actually, part of the southern part of Pleasant Township is in their school district.
Right,
But I think other than that, is what,
I don't, Pleasant
Sterling.
Township is Georgetown, that's not Russellville.
yeah, but what I'm saying is if you read these other school district, these other townships, Perry, Sterling, Green, Pike, Clark. It's like, what, I think, like Franklin, I know is Sardinia. And I'm trying to, I'm Jefferson,
Washington.
Washington,
So it's not mentioned here.
because
Because
it's
it's not.
not,
It's not
because
part
I
of
think
the,
It's not part of
Russellville's in
it.
Jefferson, I think.
I think it is.
Yes,
Jefferson.
it's-
But why,
yes,
why wouldn't
right.
it be mentioned as excluding Jefferson Township?
Because
it's
it's
not-
just saying that the boundaries are these townships, excluding that portion of Pleasant Township that is in their school district.
Okay, all right.
Do we have a second resolve?
No.
I'll second,
Okay,
Mark,
yes,
Kathleen,
yes,
Barb,
yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina.
Yeah.
Tabitha.
all right, number 9, motion to approve the disposal of property line, which is your yellow sheet.
Yes,
Tabitha?
light yellow. Not burn your eyes out.
Yeah.
Just like
I-
butter yellow.
I've got a motion on the table.
I'll second.
Oh, who was the first? Oh, Tina.
Ms. Tina.
I like totally,
I didn't bogart that conversation, I just accepted.
Mark,
Yes,
Kathleen,
Yes,
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
Tabitha.
all right, number 10, motion to approve the 2024 calendar, which is
Line-
chartreuse.
Oh, is that chartreuse? I was thinking it was lime
Yeah.
green. And I just FYI, I really try to choose the neon colors for things, you know, if you're gonna have to really, really read it, I try to choose muted colors so you don't burn out your eyeballs while you're reading things, just FYI.
Would you like to comment?
I would like to comment on this. So at this time every year, we look at, you know, for planning purposes, what are we doing next year in terms of our hours? You know, we've talked over the last couple of years about adding in some hours in our regular daily schedules and then eventually adding a day of service back to our busiest, largest libraries. And so those concepts are still in the proposal. We've come through a time when we really weren't sure what the revenues were, you know, if they were going to hold or not. And so we haven't rushed into adding anything, but the revenues have been stable. We've been doing, I think, really well with being good stewards of the funds we've got. And so, you know, it's time to add some hours back because we can do this without having to add staffing. So adding an extra hour on the front of our afternoon, evening days and adding an hour on the back end of our morning days is not going to make it impossible to staff the libraries. So that's the first chart that's up there is the new hours that we're proposing. And I would say starting Tuesday, January 2nd would be the time to actually implement that. The second chart is still with that idea of, gee, you know, we really would like to be able to provide more service. And we had looked at starting with Georgetown and Mount Orab because these will require additional staffing to be able to conduct business if we do this. We have not yet worked out any actual staffing plans, so I'm not at the point of being able to say, oh, we're going to need, you know, X number of people at X number of hours per week to be able to do this. But this is the way that we would approach it. So we would stay with the same shifts that are open, but we would add in the closed weekdays at Georgetown and Mount Orab. Now, maybe But when we get to this point of really seriously talking about it, maybe we only start with one branch, maybe you don't do both at once. But that, you know, was the way of looking at it, was to do that, and we're gonna have to do some number crunching, you know, as we move forward. So, but that's just the plan, that we'd like to look at potentially doing. And then, of course, listed at the bottom are the days that are our holidays. The fact that we've looked at and discussed our spring staff training day, we're actually going to be doing it by branch. And so we're not going to close one day and have everybody together, but we'll be doing sessions at each branch that are the same kinds of sessions, but also things like they'll have staff meetings and things that are very specific to those branches. One of which actually is a follow-up from this November's training. So in November, we're going to have Greg Henneke from our Highland Company, our Ohio Plan Risk Management. He does active shooter training. So he's going to do an active shooter training for the whole group, which is going to be a more general training. But then in the spring and March of 2024, he's going to go to each branch and do very specific on-site training, because you really, it's most effective when you're in the place where you might have to deal with an active shooter. So that's the big deep reason behind doing separate days for each branch in March. You're gonna say something, Mark? No. I see wheels turning.
Is that an OLC appointment?
There is no requirement, but in my mind, it is good practice, both to keep our staff aware. You know, there's always that balance. You don't want to scare people, right? But the fact is, you don't know what human beings are going to do.
That's right.
And so we need to be ready and prepared for this kind of thing. And our insurance company, Ohio Plan, smiles very kindly upon this kind of
Getting
training.
ready to say that.
And they're providing it free of charge to us.
Yeah.
That's a bonus with the insurance company.
So
Because if something happened, who's the first person, if someone gets hurt, third one after, is where it occurred.
You guys
And
are
then we
meeting.
provide security, safety,
Yeah.
training.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's the reasoning behind doing the March days as individual ones, is so that they can actually do that training in their own physical locations. And then, of course, we have our normal holidays. Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day are all holidays. We typically close Brown County Fair Day early so that we can do the parade. We're not going to do that this year. This is a complete aside, because the team who coordinates our fair activities, after doing polling of staff, we're going to skip parade years. It's just a lot to try and do the parade, especially when people have kids doing other, you know, I need to be in 3 different groups. How can I, you know, so we're actually going to do 9 to 4 at all branches that day. So everybody can close and then get to the parade if they're doing some other organization, or the Georgetown staff can get out of town before they get trapped in. So next year we plan on, you know, at least at this point, doing the parade. We are planning a staff development day, and I've kind of written in there, gee, you know, we might want to change that November 1st date if we can at all combine some of the board retreat with, you know, some staff development activities. But then Thanksgiving, we give 2 holidays. We give Thursday and Friday as the Thanksgiving holidays. We close early on the day before Thanksgiving. For Christmas, I took a poll of the managers. Our Christmas holidays are actually Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. We know a lot of businesses close the day after Christmas, but the consensus is that around here, both our patrons and staff members, it's more about Christmas Eve. And so that's what they want to do. I said, well, I'll propose that to the board. And then January first, obviously, that's the following year, but that's a holiday, and we will close at 5 on the day before that holiday. So that's the proposal. I wonder what questions you might have, or,
So you want us to keep, so the top part clear. Second chart, you want us to keep an open mind towards, that's the whole concept here,
Yes,
is,
yeah, we may or may not, but I want to keep it in our vision, and, yeah.
Then we need a motion.
I move.
Second.
This doesn't affect the vote or anything, but just something to think about. I'm assuming you guys keep traffic patterns of like which days most people come in. And I'm just curious, I wonder if the different timings each day impede people, or it actually helps to have different time zones. I don't know the answer to that, but you know how some people will be like, oh, if it's 9 to 5 every day, I know. But sometimes it's like, oh, it's 11 to 7. So I don't know. That's
I
just
think
something
like-
to think about.
I think in Fayetteville, they're used, because it's been this way, and if you changed it, then they'd be like, what the heck's going on here?
Change is bad.
Well, I will say that, so we have run these hours or these schedules since 2010.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so 13 years we've been on those closed days during the week. And we still have people showing up at the branches on the days that we're closed. Still,
Right.
you know, you know, and even though we haven't changed the hours either, you know, people don't remember. And so, you know, we have had conversation about that. And what we're trying to do is trying to be able to say, okay, in each locality, we've got some afternoon, evening time they can come. We've got some morning time.
Which is, good. I like that.
Can
Yeah,
come,
I mean, I
yeah.
think that's good. I
Yeah.
just didn't know if that
Yeah.
affected people.
Yeah, you know, I can't remember where I'm supposed to be when without looking at my planner, so, you know.
The only thing that
I have
I
to look at my
might,
calendar 3 times a day
Yeah.
now. I just can't
that I
remember.
might, yeah, the only thing I might recommend with school starting would be stay open maybe one evening longer and close earlier one day. You know, like Saturday, I think people are pretty busy on Saturday, you know, getting groceries or whatever else instead of library. And,
Sports stuff.
Or
Yeah.
that might be the only day they can get.
Get to the library.
well, that's
They
true.
work Monday.
Maybe,
Yeah,
you
right.
know, you could like ask people when they come in.
I was gonna say, we haven't done a specific survey like that in a couple of years. And, you know, certainly I would say before we went to the point of adding days back
Right.
in, it would be time to do a thorough survey.
Yeah.
of
And we
that.
talked about doing a survey as part of our strategic planning anyway.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Well, and I will just say that the last time we did a really scientific survey and actually had an outside company help us doing this. And actually, even when we did it in-house, you know, in between, people will, you know, if you give people options for when you know, when would you come to the library? You know, oh, it's 24/7. 24/7. So, you know, we kind of look at those and go, well, that's not helped us at all, decide what hours to be open.
And people will say, oh, I would go from 9 to 5, but until they actually show up, you know, they can say anything.
Yeah.
So it will be something that we will need to do with some caution and, yeah.
I was gonna say, like, with just my family, like, of course, you know, my kids, reciprocate, like, we're always at the library, but it seems like we always hit Wednesday when they're closed, or it's always Saturday after they've already
Close,
closed.
yes.
So I was, you know, was looking at this and I was showing him, I don't know, am I allowed to do that? And I asked him, I said, okay, I was just showing him.
As long as there's nothing
Or maybe,
personal.
well, just the hours is all
Yes,
I
oh,
showed.
yeah.
I was just like, look, that they might have the hours a little longer.
Yeah,
He was really excited,
Well,
but.
that's good. Yeah,
So I don't know, but it's just funny because I feel like we know the hours, but we still, it feels like spontaneously, let's go to the library, oh, it's Wednesday. It's kind of like Chick-fil-A when you always want it on Monday and you always get it. But I feel like that with the library. So this made, at least it made our family very excited.
Good.
Like I said, I didn't know if I was even allowed to show him, but I thought the hours would be a bad thing to show.
No, absolutely. No, that's fine. And actually, that's a great way to get some input. And I mean, you are the ones who are out in the communities, right? Asking, you know, people who use the libraries, what's working for them, what's not. Now, I will say that when we put the lockers in, that, you know, doesn't help for things like, oh, I want to go to a program, right? Or that kind of thing. But we have more people using those lockers outside of library hours. I mean, and so it effectively extends,
We
you
use it
know,
all
the
the
hours,
time.
yeah. It's so we're happy that, you know, to have that as another option, but it doesn't solve every problem, yeah.
Okay, we're ready.
Yep, Mark,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes,
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Tabitha.
Yes.
All right, number 11, motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with Ohio Means Job.
Right,
Ohio
Pink,
Means Job.
right, Pink, which I did purposely because we have already talked about this last month, and you can see that I already signed it because it's a budget neutral thing, and it's something actually that the state requires Ohio Means Jobs to do with their partner libraries, so there was no question that I was going to sign it, but I did have them change a little bit of the wording about our responsibilities because it almost implied that, you know, we had to do some of their marketing for them, and I said, we can't do that. Well, you know, you can come put it up on our community bulletin board and, you know, and we'll share it if it's on our Facebook feed, but that's out the side of it.
I will need a motion.
I will move that we accept the memorandum of understanding.
I'll second.
Mark,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes,
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Tabitha.
Number 12. We have two, so I need a motion to approve the law library contracts effective 1/1/24, 12/31/24. First one with the Brown County Law Library Resource Board for provision of law library services in the annual amount of $22,620.
that was great.
Right.
Right, and this, you know, just to bring everybody onto an even playing field here. So this is a contract that we've had with the Brown County Law Library Resources Board and the Commissioner for 10 years, 11, informally longer than that, but formally for about a dozen years. I think it's been almost 12 years. And basically, counties are required by law to have a county law library. They are required to have a space. They are required to have a law librarian. They're required to provide for the needs of the local attorneys and courts, and also for members of the public who might have legal research needs. Franklin County, Cuyahoga County, and, you know, Hamilton County have plenty of money to be able to do that and have a separate space and have good staff, and well, Brown County and Adams County don't. So we actually, I believe we're still the only county in Ohio where we have a contract between the Law Library Resources Board, which is responsible for the law library, and the public library, where we actually provide those services for them. So we have some dedicated space in the Georgetown Library because that's in the county seat and right near all the courts and such. And we have some staff time dedicated to providing the services and doing things like taking minutes at the meetings and processing payments and all those things that, well, not processing, approving and submitting it to the county auditor, because the county auditor processes all the financials. But that's basically what we do. So, you know, you can see what our responsibilities are on that last page of the document. And the only change from the prior year is we actually are asking for a 2.1% increase in the fee because we reconfigured the staffing a bit. Our manager Tanya is doing most of the work. I don't have to do as much anymore, and we have been unable to keep an actual dedicated part-time person in that role. So it's just here and there. We pull somebody off of some public library stuff and have them assist Tanya. So that's what that is.
So we need a motion.
If you want to do them separately, and probably you
Yeah,
should, yes.
You do it separately.
Yeah.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Mark,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Tabitha.
Yes.
And the purple one is the facilities part, because the county commissioners are the ones who by law are required to provide space, the facilities for the library. So they are quote leasing space from us in the Georgetown Library, which covers our overhead and, you know, space for tables and shelving that's not dedicated to public library materials, but to law library materials. So this annual fee of $6,500 to cover those things is a 3.2% increase over last year's contract.
So we need a motion to approve law library contracts effective 1/1/2024 to 12/31/24 with the Brown County Commissioners for lease of space for the law library in the annual amount of $6,500.
I'll make the motion for the commissioners. Release for 6,500.
I'll second.
Mark,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Tabitha.
Yes.
And just as an FYI, so usually we do this in August so that when the law library board meets in September, they know that this board has approved the contract and then they can go ahead and move on it. If somewhere in all of that legalese, you know, it says that we have to give each other 3 months notice if we're not going to renew. So that's why they, you know, have to deal with it by September. So.
Thank you. Number 13, censorship in public libraries. Lynn, thank you for sharing this.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it, excellent article, straight to the point. However, I feel like even though the article is great and I love it, almost like you have to write it because the current climate that the country is in. And I was telling Lynn, did you guys hear about the state board, the decision they made before the schools open? They outlawed Shakespeare.
Oh, you're kidding.
Anything by Shakespeare?
You are kidding. What for?
I think it was
did I say?
raunchy. There's some
Raunchy.
raunchy stuff in there.
That was the word. I couldn't
Yes.
remember.
Yeah.
Wow.
I always thought of it as body because that was kind of the
Well,
terminology.
I don't know if it was risque
Or
or
risque,
raunchy,
something.
raunchy, but I
Oh,
think
my
it was
goodness sakes.
raunchy. Yeah, that's.
Oh, no.
Is that not frightening? This is classic literature.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about references that we make to things in everyday speech, I mean, more references are made to from Shakespeare's,
Yeah.
from Shakespeare
Mhm.
and from the Bible than almost anything else. Those two pieces of literature and yeah. You know, it's funny because I think about
That's scary.
in schools, you know, why do kids not want to read it? Because they can't get past the language, right?
Yeah.
It's about the language because it's an archaic,
Right.
you know, form of language. It's not about content, because how many Romeo and Juliet stories have been produced since Shakespeare, you know, not just Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it is, it's an entire genre.
To
So,
me, it's like poetry. You know, yeah, when you first hear it, it sounds obtuse, but as you get into the flow of it and you actually watch somebody perform it, it's like, oh, wow, you know, and you have to understand the history. This is kind of the history of English. This
It
is
is.
how they spoke.
Oh, yeah.
We can't just throw all that away and say, oh, it doesn't matter anymore. that's the foundation for a lot of the stuff that came later in literature.
Well, and that's why Lynn and I kind of talk about this topic has to be brought up and it has to be discussed. We have to keep tabs on it. We have to see what's going on until eventually it will end, I'm assuming, at some point.
Yeah.
Something's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You don't know exactly what it is, but you know, what I really liked about this particular piece was, it just takes a different perspective on it, and it's very encouraging to the people who are on the front lines. And, you know, I think that's something that we can forget as we're arguing about the Shakespeare. How could they get rid of Shakespeare? Well, you know, somebody is having to hear this kind of stuff, you know, on the ground floor pretty regularly. The point's also made that, you know, I think there were a couple of really good phrases that he used that we can provide to our staff members for scripting purposes, you know, that we're,
Kind of gives you something that.
yeah, you know, it's not about disagreeing with people. It's about, you know, we're about having the, you know, capacity to share and access ideas, you
I
know,
love
widest possible range of viewpoints, you know.
I like
so-
the final one, that the free, robust exchange of ideas has always been the heart of the American democracy.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
But if you look at the title
Mhm.
that he picked, it was picked very specifically. Okay, me personally, I've never thought of the freedom to read. I've not thought about it in that respect.
Mhm.
But what is the current climate in our country?
Oh, absolutely.
Freedom of speech, you hear a lot of,
Yeah.
you know, right to bear arms, freedom of this. Very clever how he picked that as the topic, or what do you call that, the heading or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But thank you, Lynn, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Well, and Tina had
Yeah, so.
something to share as well.
This was, I found this before I even got my packet, but if you guys don't care, I'd love to read this to you. But, I found this in my office. I went through some papers and I wrote this when Dr. Seuss book got banned. This is what, 2-3 years ago? And I had forgotten about this and I sent it into the letter that entered.
I forgot.
So I found this and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what we're talking about. So it's titled How the Grinch Stole My Freedom. As a teen, I read the book Animal Farm by George Orwell. I vaguely remember the book in detail. However, I remember the theme of the book, an allegory of socialism and the socialistic behavior from animals living together on a farm. How does this book relate to what is going on in America today? Everything. Napoleon, a pig who despises his owner, the farmer, decides to overthrow the farm and create a new society. A whole other list of characters support Napoleon and bring about change for what they feel like in the beginning is positive. Allow me to quote directly from Orwell. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Censorship as defined by the First Amendment encyclopedia occurs when individuals or groups try to prevent others from saying, printing, or depicting words and images. Therefore, does censoring the publications of certain books and other media revoke our liberties? The recent banning of 6 Dr. Seuss books was my tipping point. The below books were pulled from shelves this week, and USA Today wrote that 6 of the children's book authors' titles are no longer being sold because of racist and insensitive imagery. It was Mulberry Street, Mr. McElligot's Pool, Rain the Zoos, Scrambled Eggs, Beyond Zebra, Cat's Perfect. Many will argue that the above is legitimate and needed so as not to offend others. However, our forefathers did not create this country on the precipice of making others happy or the need to protect them from prejudice. The first and most important amendment is the freedom of speech. To quote our Bill of Rights directly, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Why exactly are we creating censorship and therefore moving away from democracy to socialism? Are we that wounded as a society that we cannot bear to hear or discern thoughts that may be inappropriate, albeit freedom of expression? While trying to drive out hate, aren't we also driving out our own freedom of choice? Instead of taking things away, let us use these items as tools to educate. I fear for my son who has to grow up in a society that discriminates against the freedom of thought and expression. The steps we take today to censor, however small, will become propaganda for a democracy that was and will not be. I fear for generations of future that will be disempowered to speak or to communicate in fear of being judged or ostracized for not thinking like the ones in power. I am not exempt from being offended. While it may not compare to others' injustice and much worse than some, who am I to judge the impact of the offense on a person? Am I not equal to others in my suffering? Each day we must carry our own cross. We must bear the burdens of not only our own inequities, by others' injustice that is put upon us. No level of censorship or control of power will take that away. By removing the very freedom of speech that we are guaranteed as US citizens, it will not take away the sadness, the hurt. It will not ungrip the cross that we carry each day. Instead of turning to our government to control us, let us look inward and upward to our higher power for guidance, justice, forgiveness, and hopefully unity among all people. What starts out as a noble gesture to better the life of the animals on the farm, Napoleon, their leader, becomes just as corrupt and oppressive as their owner, from whom they were trying to protect themselves. Nothing is gained, and the revolution he led resulted in a repeat behavior, a vicious cycle of control and hate. Let us not be like animals. Let us look to each other to become the democracy that once was. A democracy that does not censor. It employs leaders to educate and to give us the freedom to discern independent of influence. Will taking away these 6 Dr. Seuss books absolve all who are offended by them? I think not. The books are not the problem, we are. The more we ban, the more freedom we lose. When will it stop? Is our freedom worth more than living in a society without choice? Is it worth more than losing our voice?
That's very good.
Very good.
And if you really look at what went on in Germany and how they kept just controlling and controlling and controlling, it scares the heck out of me
Yeah.
about where they're headed.
And, you know, the problem really that we're having right now is you can't have the minority control what's good for the majority. You know, separation of church and state, you know, one small little group can't decide what the rest of the country wants because it doesn't work that way.
No,
Yeah. And, yeah, that's.
Very,
Florida.
very
That was-
timely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was good.
Yeah, I found it and I'm like.
I remember reading that pretty young.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tina.
Yeah,
Thanks for letting me share that.
yeah,
No, that's
absolutely.
perfect timing. Number 14, motion to enter executive session.
I will move.
I will second.
Mark,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Tabitha.
So Heather has asked for a copy of that,
Okay.
so yes, we would definitely like if I can, scan that in or whatever, and that would be fabulous. And I'm going to stop the recording. Yay. And Heather, is there anything else that you would like to communicate to people?
No, but I did want to say, which I missed saying it earlier when your announcements, the OLC shared our Curiosity Carnival, and I thought that was pretty darn cool.
Yes, yes, I think that was on the list, yeah, so, yeah. Yeah, it was very cool because, yeah, those are not things that we submit, they go through and look at different libraries, media and the whole thing, and so. Yeah, absolutely.
And that was very well spoken, Tina.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Very nice. Fabulous. Okay, well, Heather, I'll probably see you tomorrow.
Bye, Heather.
Bye, Mark. Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.
I'm going to go ahead and